He's all relaxed. He's ready for it.
His batteries are charged.
All right. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, this July 23rd, 2018 meeting. The first item is going into closed meeting. Specifically, be it resolved that the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors, Montgomery County, Virginia, hereby enters into a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following. Section 2.2-3711, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. 1, opiate litigation. 2, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplinary, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. 1, CPMT. 2, New River Community College Board. 3, Transportation Safety Commission. 4, Virginia Tech Montgomery Regional Airport. And then 5, personnel. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Supervisor Shepard made the motion.
Second.
And Supervisor Fidzikowski seconded. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMonts?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepard?
Aye.
And Chair Tuck?
Aye. We're in closed meeting.
7 ayes.
Is there a motion to come out of closed meeting?
Motion.
A motion made by Supervisor King. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Biggs. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMonts?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepard?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
And Chair Tuck?
Aye.
I have 7 ayes.
The next item on our agenda is certification of the closed meeting. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby certifies to the best of each member's knowledge only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board. And what this certification is our board's word to you that we're not discussing things that we're not supposed to back in closed meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion. Second.
And that was a motion by Supervisor King and a second by Supervisor Shepard. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Supervisor DeMonts?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepard?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
And Chair Tuck?
Aye.
I have 7 ayes.
The next item on our agenda is a moment of silence. And as we're doing that, I would ask folks to consider the Christiansburg families, one who lost a teenager and the other one who is in the hospital, as I understand it. If you would keep that family in your thoughts and prayers. And then after our moment of silence, I would ask the county administrator to lead us in the pledge. Will we all rise?
Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
The next item on our agenda is a presentation resolution of commemoration from for Dr. Charles Steger, and I'm going to ask my fellow supervisors to join me down front. this resolution. Forgive me, I've got to put the glasses on. This is a resolution of commemoration Charles W. Seaver Jr., Virginia Tech President, 2000 to 2014. Whereas the recent death of Charles Seaver has touched and saddened all those who knew and loved him. And whereas Charles Seaver was Virginia Tech's 15th president from 2000 to 2014. And whereas under his leadership, Virginia Tech grew in enrollment from 28,000 to 31,000, increasing graduate enrollment by 12%, raised more than $1 billion in private funding, formed a school of biomedical engineering, created a public-private school of medicine, and constructed the Moss Art Center and the Virginia Tech Research Center at Arlington as part of the largest building boom in the university's history. And whereas he also led the university through the tragedy of April 16, 2007, and his leadership inspired the university and community to pull together to move forward. Whereas the Board of Supervisors fully recognizes the hard work and dedication and leadership of Charles Seaver, as demonstrated in his years of service to Virginia Tech and the Montgomery County community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia offers its deepest condolences and most heartfelt sympathy to his family and offers a special tribute to Charles Seaver for his many contributions to the citizens of Montgomery County. I'll get on back.
Come in tighter, real close, real close. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the 2008 legislative session and special session update. And to make that presentation, Chris Hurst is here. Thank you very much, Delegate Hurst. We greatly appreciate it.
Sure, of course, Chairman. Thank you very much. All members of the board, thank you very much for having me here this evening. I would be remiss without acknowledging the great contributions that Dr. Steger had to our wonderful community, and I hope that you continue to stay here as a part of our wonderful community as well. Ran into both of you when I was knocking on doors, and you guys were just leaving your home. I remember that distinctly last year. I was able to take a special trip with Tom Dingus from the Transportation Institute not too long ago, and the stories that he had to tell about Dr. Steger's leadership were many and quite funny, actually, as he was sharing them too. I think one thing that we continued to need to acknowledge about his service to this area and to Virginia Tech was how we were able to grow as a research institution and the prioritization he had on that, and making Virginia Tech one of the best research institutes in the entire country. So I am happy to be here before you, giving an update kind of on what we all did in the General Assembly during the regular session, what went on during the special session. We are still in our first special session, and so what still is remaining to be done for that. But I wanted to proactively reach out to our boards and to our councils in the 12th District just to let you know what we were doing during the first half of this year. I was in Giles County late last week. I will say to you, Mr. Meadows, that Chris McClarney, the county administrator up there in Giles County, does not get a seat at the dais. So consider yourself very fortunate. And
Thank you.
it must of course be because of the wonderful work that you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you very
get
much,
that
sir.
position next to the chairman. So with that, I'll get kind of right into some top line things for what we did during the General Assembly session, get down into some of the specifics, especially as it relates to potential legislation that will impact Montgomery County, some things our office is working on trying to do for the rest of the year, and then also want to leave plenty of time for all of you to give any comments or suggestions or commands on what I should be doing for a legislative package potentially for next year. So we introduced, as a General Assembly in 2018, 3,700 bills. 1,800 of them passed. So as a stark contrast from what you see in our nation's capital, Virginia is still a place where there can be bipartisanship and agreement and accomplishment on a whole host of many different issues. So when we were talking about the most important thing, though, we couldn't agree on that during the regular session. We had to go to the special session for our budget. And so as a representative of the General Assembly, but just speaking for myself, I have apologized to some of you individually, but want to apologize in a public setting for not being able to deliver a budget on time. And certainly we were able to deliver a budget before the end of the fiscal year, but that wasn't on time in my mind. We should have done that before the regular session ended. I know what a crunch that put on local governments, including Montgomery County, to try and make sure that you had a budget prepared before the end of the fiscal year, especially for our local school boards. You all try very, very hard to do your job on time. The General Assembly should do a better job next time of trying to deliver a budget on time. But we did complete a budget. That budget is about $21 billion for fiscal year 2019 and $21.64 billion for fiscal year 2020. About 29.8% of that goes directly for local aid, K through 12. Now that's not where we were about 10 years ago, and that still continues to be one of the main struggles that I face in the General Assembly as not only a new entrant, but also somebody who serves on the Education Committee. And just so you know, back in fiscal year 2009, the state appropriated about 35% of aid to localities for their overall school budgets. And as I said, we're about 30% right now, so we still have a long way to go to get back to where we were before the recession. But what we did do with our budget, because it included Medicaid expansion, that freed up some additional monies that we were able to reallocate in other places. Part of that included $481 million over the biennium for re-benchmarking for SOQ that's coming from the state. We also are increasing the at-risk add-on payment to 14% in the second year of the biennium. Particularly important for me, and I think for many people in Montgomery County with our inclusion model here, that we're trying to do what we can to support special education programs all throughout the Commonwealth. One of the other things, too, is that we are going to do another 3% pay raise for teachers. In addition, we will also have pay raises for state-supported local employees, 2%, effective July 1st, 21-19, contingent on the revenues being there, and we've been doing pretty well so far at this calendar year as a state for the revenue collections we've been able to do, especially from non-withholding tax collections. But as I have said to individual members, and will say again here in public, what we are able to fund for our share of a teacher raise for SOQ is good, but we all know that it's clearly not enough, because that puts an unfunded mandate on all of you to try and find that money to match the other part of it. And then you have many positions that are not SOQ funded, but are still necessary and vital positions for the school system. So I've already talked with Dr. Meyer on how we can actually maybe change the way we do these salary increases so that it's not an opportunity for members of the General Assembly to pat themselves on the back while we give you guys the tab for the portions that you all have to pay. And so that's a conversation that's continuing with Dr. Meyer and other superintendents. I got named to the Western Virginia Public Educators Consortium, which is superintendents pretty much all south and west of Roanoke, and this is the main issue that they talk about is teacher salaries, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a bit. So for particular pieces of legislation as they affect different areas that I think are of note that you may find interesting, we did Senate Bill 170, which prohibits any student in preschool through grade 3 from being suspended or for more than 3 school days or from being expelled. And this was something that was a compromise piece of legislation, one that some of the school systems were not in support of, and certainly we don't ever want to take away the ability or the choice of a school system to handle discipline. But for this, especially in African American communities, so this was really more of a Richmond Tidewater issue, where you had a lot of school discipline issues that were centered around race, even in elementary schools, that this was something that was seen by a lot of lawmakers in that area as a priority, and was one that then later became a priority of the General Assembly to try and prevent children from being expelled when they're in first, second, third grade. We also passed a bill that will include in our family life education curricula to include age-appropriate elements of effective and evidence-based programs on personal privacy and personal boundaries of others. Certainly, as we are now in this Me Too movement, whether you have one thought or another on this climate and this culture that we are in, I think it's of prime importance that we are teaching our young men and women about appropriate boundaries and about what is considered appropriate both in the school and outside of the school. We also passed a recess bill where now unallocated instructional time can be used to send kids outside. It was known affectionately as the recess bill, but this is a way, really what we find, especially as SOLs are finishing up, we don't really have a lot of stuff for our kids to be doing that's not currently structured. So being able to free up ways for kids to be able to get outside and exercise more, I think is going to be a great thing. In mental health areas, we were able to finally now start to get law enforcement out of the temporary detention order business. For so long, I've heard from so many, both in my prior profession and currently in this role, from law enforcement agencies, and I've heard from the sheriff here in this county about the burden placed on law enforcement taking individuals who have had an order for temporary detention issued against them, where they are taking individuals all across the Commonwealth in order to try and satisfy that. We still have not fixed where we are sending patients, and that's something the General Assembly still needs to work on, because that hurts the patient, that hurts their family, it prevents them from being able to effectively enter into long-term recovery when they exit out of that mental health stay. But the burden we've been placing on law enforcement has been going on for far too long. So just to know what it's going to look like in the future, it's going to be a grant process that the CSB is going to have to take up, but NRVCS I think is in prime position to get some funds to be able to have alternative transportation for these individuals. That essentially means that a third-party contractor would be doing that transport instead of putting that individual in handcuffs in the back of a squad car. Now, it won't cure it at all for law enforcement. They still will have to do some transports. There was a test study that was done for the Mount Rogers CSB, and it only cleared out law enforcement about 50% of the time, but 50% of the time is still better than 100% of the time. And so that's going to start to phase in here in the next little bit. Let's see, what else do I have on here then? I think will either please you or make you really upset with me. Okay, let's get to something that's going to possibly upset you with me, even though I voted against it. Let's talk about the wireless communication infrastructure bill. So this was one that was very hotly debated. VACO and its associated activists, advocates, I would say, were very effective in lobbying to know what this bill would have done to take away local control, as we're now in certainly a prime environment of where do cell phone towers go and how can we make sure that the companies that are installing these towers are working effectively with localities to get this done. So it did pass. It passed narrowly. It was not a party line vote. Some Democrats voted for this in addition to Republicans, and so there was no partisanship for it. It was more of a regional and then also a business versus locality kind of debate. But it did pass, and so let me just tell you briefly again what it would do. It would establish parameters for zoning approval by localities for certain new wireless support structures 50 feet in height or less, and co-location small cell facilities on existing structures. The small cell facilities probably not affecting us too much, except maybe in the town of Blacksburg. But the bill exempts both from the special use permit process in place of administrative review, capping the application review cost of $500. I'm not exactly sure what the cost was in Montgomery County before that, but some localities have been charging lots of money in order to try and make that the price of doing business, and the telecom companies wanted that not to be the case, and so that was in the final piece of legislation as that got capped at $500. The bill prohibits localities from disapproving applications due to unreasonable discrimination as they define it in the bill, and provides prescriptive questions the locality can include in the application, but it really does seriously curtail your ability to effectively decide on your own whether you would want these structures in a specific place or not. Now, What it could do on the other side is it could provide for better increased coverage and reliability. VACO disagrees with that. I tend to disagree with that as well, but that has been a push that's been used by some individuals saying that this would free up an ability to actually increase cell coverage in rural areas. I think what will really increase coverage in rural areas is to continue to work with the governor's office on trying to come up with some public-private partnership funds to actually do that last mile broadband work that I think is so critically important for not only Montgomery County but all areas that are in my district. So we also had another bill right after that too that was also about wireless support structures, and that was public rights of way use fees, and that says that the annual fees and heights are for the following: $1,000 for a structure below 50 feet, 3,000 feet for a structure between 50 and 120 feet, 5,000 above 120 feet, and $1 per square foot for any other equipment, shelter, or associated facilities constructed on the ground. Now, that's mostly going to be for, well, not mostly, it potentially could be used a lot by VDOT and their rights of ways, but I think it would also have a lot of impact on localities too. And so that's something that, again, I voted against, but ultimately it did pass. So one bill as it relates to agriculture that I think is important is that we have passed a bill that requires agricultural operations be in substantial compliance with applicable statutes and best management practices. If you're doing that, if you're following BMPs, and you decide to cut up your farm and sell the farmhouse, but you want to keep the rest of the farm for yourself, and the person from Northern Virginia comes and moves into the farmhouse, doesn't understand what living next to a farm smells like, looks like, and sounds like, and then they would sue a lot of times. We've been seeing a lot of these kinds of cases in rural areas. We've now really curtailed the ability for an individual to sue a farmer just for doing basic farming practices. You know, if you've ever been out during calving, lambing, you know, if you're not used to it, it can be very shocking and uncomfortable for some, but that it should not be grounds where you can basically sue them for doing what they're getting paid to do, you know, for their livelihood. One last little measure that I would want to talk to you about is House Bill 220. That authorizes a locality or park authority to establish, conduct, and regulate a system of boating, canoeing, kayaking, or tubing activities on waterways, and to have certain powers. So it also releases a certain civil liability for a locality that establishes such a system, or a system of hiking, biking, horseback riding trails, and the owner of any property leased or licensed from those uses, unless you have gross negligence or willful misconduct. But you know, as this whole region really tries to market itself more as a place to go out and to do things outside, and we have more opportunities for trails and things to do in the water, if a government organization is going to develop some type of body to administer that outdoor recreation, we want to make sure that the liability you all put on is not cost prohibitive from actually trying to attempt the project and complete the project itself. And a couple other things that I wanted to talk about with you is that what our office is working on right now. But before I get to that, real quickly about what our office was able to accomplish. We passed 3 bills. All of them impact Montgomery County in some way. I worked with Mr. Meadows extensively on trying to get the Old Prices Fork Elementary, getting them their special mixed beverage license. So that finally was able to get done. It was a complicated process, unfortunately. Actually have had an initial conversation with Majority Leader Gilbert about maybe having some type of overhaul of the way we do these little carve-out special liquor by the drink licenses. There's a delegate, Barry Knight, he calls them hide the hooch bills, because you know there are many localities that don't have liquor by the drink, and to be able to have to go to the General Assembly and ask and go through this big rigmarole, I think it's time that we change this process so that we don't slow the potential economic development that could come to these areas. And what's going on there at the Old Prices Fork Elementary School is fantastic, and will continue to be fantastic once Rising Salo makes that transition over there too. So that bill got passed. Blacksburg's Town Charter had a simple amendment that they needed that would deal with the way that they put out notices for public hearing and when you can take action on items that are put out for public hearing. And then Giles County and the town of Bridge Creek submitted to me an idea of trying to close a tax loophole with the Department of Motor Vehicles that essentially would allow you to go and get new tags or re-register a new car if you still had taxes owed on another car. So DMV used to just look at the car, now they're going to look at you, the person. If you owe a back taxes on a car, you can't go into DMV and continue to try and do a whole sort of different titling and registering. You can do it for a 90-day basis, and then after that, you essentially would be driving illegally. And that's something that is really, I think, going to help localities who are trying to get that revenue collected on a timely basis, a way to continue to nudge people to try and pay their taxes on time, and if they're not paying them on time, to at least get them paid up quickly, that they can get back on the road legally, and our localities can make sure that they can have their balance sheets matching up. So our office is reaching out, proactively trying to meet with as many people as possible to get ideas on what we can do next year. I'm limited with the number of bills I can introduce in an odd year, so that will be at 15. But just as an example, earlier this week was down in Wytheville with the Virginia Tech Mobile Autism Clinic at the Autism Center at Virginia Tech. They have been receiving patients in GALACs for the past month and a half or so. These are children who were previously undiagnosed with autism, where they can go and actually get a diagnosis and get a referral for services. Not only autism identification and coverage for children is very important to me, because even insurance coverage for autism is pretty poor in Virginia right now, but also just being able to do the diagnostic and screen. And so we had a legislative policy summit this past week where we're coming up with different ideas on things we might be able to do to try and help not only identify children in rural areas who may have autism spectrum disorder, and make sure that not only they, but also their caregivers get the attention and resources that they need. So with that being said, with this idea of wanting to get ideas and feedback and comments and criticisms from as many people in the district as possible, I will end there and leave it up to you, Mr. Chairman. And if there are any comments or suggestions on the legislative agenda for next session, I am here to take some copious notes.
Well, I'll start off with Supervisor King. Do you have any questions of Delegate Hurst?
I think, Mr. Hurt, you want some criticism?
If you'd like, I'm here for it. I can stand up and take it.
No, I just, the court system come out and said it's okay for Commonwealth Virginia to charge internet tax.
Right.
I just want to ask you if you would be on Montgomery County side to get their fair share if it does start.
Yeah. I think it will start. I think that when I talk to people in the General Assembly, they all had pretty much said, this is kind of now finally almost decided. I think we still will we probably will have a special session again in the fall. We may lump it into this. Well, no, we can't. Well, we could change the resolution for this first special session we're in. But we're going to need to, I think, have another time where we come back in the fall as a legislature and talk about taxation issues, not only conformity with the federal tax changes that happen, but also to take up what our next action item is with internet sales tax collection. But I certainly think that it should be able to be collected at a locality basis.
I mean, as you know, I'm a conservative. I'm against any high tax. But I'm just looking for the brick and mortar store or local people. A lot of them are getting hurt because we can't tax internet sales.
It's something that I've heard from a lot of small businesses, but I think, if you just ask a layperson, if you buy something on Amazon or if you buy something at, Sugar Magnolias in downtown Blacksburg that just opened up, you should pay the sales tax for wherever you live. It seems simple to me. So unfortunately, I had to go to the Supreme Court in order to get decided, but I would say give us a few months and we'll try and shake out the implementation for that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Fidzikowski.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse to death, but that's one of our concerns, that we feel like there's no formula that the state is using to make sure that we get our little part of that sales tax back here locally. That's money that we depend on too. But if you all are going to work on that and solve that problem, I'll leave that alone. But I am curious to know if the General Assembly has worked out what's going to happen in a couple of years with Medicaid expansion and how that's going to get paid for.
Well, so Medicaid expansion is paid for by a dedicated tax at the federal level, and until that measure would be repealed, it will stay in as part of federal law in perpetuity. When you look at the current climate in Washington, and the top priority of repealing the Affordable Care Act was for this current Congress, and yet it was not able to be completed, in my mind, I tend to think that that means that the Affordable Care Act is here to stay. Certainly it can be improved in myriad ways. I think calling it the Affordable Care Act was probably the first problem with the Affordable Care Act, but I still think that we can improve upon it. And if I was a betting man, I don't think that the provision for Medicaid expansion is going to be going away anytime soon, and that means that that dedicated federal tax will be there, and so that means that Medicaid expansion will be paid for moving forward. We do have the hospital provider assessment. Essentially they wanted to pay up in order to be able to get those patients into their doors and not in through an emergency room. So the portion that the state pays for Medicaid expansion is going to be taken care of by the hospital systems all throughout the Commonwealth. And I do think, though, it needs to be acknowledged that our Medicaid continues to be a bigger part of our budget every single biennium. It continues to grow more and more and more. The reason for that, I truly believe, is because of the rising cost of health care all the way around. We talk about who ends up having to pay the bill all the time. We talk about rising insurance premiums, deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance, how people on Medicare are now having to take on all of these additional supplemental insurance plans, how teachers can't afford their health insurance anymore, much less the locality and the school division. But it's the cost of care. It's how much we're being charged. It's not just about the bill. I introduced a drug price transparency bill to try and look at the prices that drug companies are charging us here in Virginia for certain qualifying conditions, and that got killed. But I'm really primarily interested not only in making sure that we are as efficient as possible, and our Medicaid program in Virginia is one of the most efficient in the country. And so, we also get less from the federal government for our Medicaid program than pretty much any other state in the country. So when it comes to are we really just sucking Washington, D.C. dry to pay for Medicaid, and if something changes in D.C., we're going to get left holding the bag. Most states, especially southern states, are about 73% of their Medicaid program is paid for by the federal government. In Virginia, it's a 50-50 split. And that means, I think, the solvency of our Medicaid program moving forward is very strong.
So what you're telling me is that in a couple of years that we're not going to have to be looking at large tax increases to make up for the added people that'll be on it?
Unless the Affordable Care Act were to be repealed and that dedicated funding stream at the federal level were to go away, we're going to be good. And one thing too to remember is that the increased people who are going to be getting on to the rolls for Medicaid expansion right now are people that were already taxing our healthcare system. It just wasn't a tax. It was by not going to the doctor at all, and then when they do finally go to the doctor because they're symptomatic of a chronic disease, it's already past the point where they could either be treated or that treatment would then be way more expensive than if they had health insurance and had been able to go see a doctor regularly. So there's lots of ways in which maybe increased costs from this federal tax are going to be offset by the savings we're going to be getting because people are going to have insurance coverage. They're going to be able to go see a doctor and not have to worry about the cost quite as much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor DeMons.
Hi,
Or
Chris.
Vice Chair. Excuse me, I forget sometimes.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. I hope this is the first of many years where we get to have you come in and give us a legislative update every year. It's very nice to have that. I think you also attended our legislative dinner earlier this year, where we give a copy of our legislative priorities to all of our elected officials. So this is just a plug. Put that on your calendar. We don't have the date yet, but just pencil it in for sometime next year to come to that dinner. I do third what my colleagues here said about the sales tax and finding that revenue stream for us. We were very surprised this year in our sales tax revenue decrease. And one of the theories, and we talked about this in your office in Richmond, was that is due to internet sales. So I go along with them on that for sure. Also, thank you for the work that you've done so far for education. Keep it up. You know that here locally, we are behind where we were 10 years ago in funding education, so everything that you're doing is going to have considerable impact here. Thank you. And definitely keep working hard at that. And then you made reference to it when talking about House Bill 220. I do want to, I guess, ask your opinion and for your support in the Valley to Valley Trail system that this board has tried to advance, creating a trail from Galax through Roanoke. I don't know if we ever found out the exact mileage of how long that trail would be, but it would be long, 100 miles.
Yeah.
Yes.
Over 100. Yeah.
And so definitely your support and anything that you can do to help us advance that initiative. We know we're looking at a probably 2-decade or more long project, but hopefully we can count on you to be on our team for that. And then as a chore to my children, Katie and Price wanted me to both tell you hello.
Will you tell them I said that?
I will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Supervisor Biggs.
Okay, also internet sales tax, but I want to talk about a few other things. First, I want to thank you for, trying to find out before you ever went to the General Assembly what people needed and reaching out to all the various people that you did through the 12th District, including a lot of us here sitting at this table. And not just before, but all during the session, your openness and accessibility, and then coming here. I think that those three things together make for a really good representative in Richmond. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for your vote on the Wireless Communications Act. As having been down there in your office talking about it, I know what a difficult vote that was for you, and I want to thank you for voting against it. I want to thank you for voting for the recess bill, because this is something as a former elementary teacher that has bothered me for a long time, and it wasn't fair to our children. It still isn't fair to our children, in my opinion, what we're doing to them in schools as far as testing. But at least if we can get some movement back in, I think that's really important. Now, on this salaries for teachers, I don't know what you might be thinking or how you all might approach it with the group that you're working with, but if there's anything I can do or anyone else that has been a teacher, because this is every single year this goes on. And in Virginia, the state has got to step up and take responsibility, and we talk about it, but then it doesn't happen. And I know you stood up for it, and I want to compliment you, and I want to thank you for doing that, and thank you for continuing, because that is a big chunk out of our budget. And as I have looked the past year, I've seen 2 highly qualified teachers leave the elementary school where I taught, and it was a shame that they had to leave, but they weren't going to, they just couldn't do it anymore.
Right. I think we see this dynamic play out in real time, and I think people really need to be woken up to it. Giles County has a fabulous career and technical education teacher. He is now Montgomery County's career and technical education teacher. Montgomery County teachers, go to the park and ride, the carpool to go teach in Salem, right? So, Giles has its issues, Montgomery has issues, Salem has its issues with trying to get teachers. And part of the reason why I wanted to apologize for not getting the budget done on time is it was difficult for the school board to put out contracts when they didn't know how much money they're actually going to be able to work with. And I heard that from various school divisions where they lost out on teachers because of the timing. And that to me is really shameful. To answer your question about what kind of the plan is and how we're going to kind of go about convening a work group, but it will be a work group. And our office wants to come to the table next year with a plan. We have talked about teacher salaries and how we don't support teachers enough for far too long, that a 3% teacher raise is a cost of living adjustment increase, is essentially what it is. And with rising costs for health insurance premiums, that's essentially what it's all going toward. So what it actually feels like in the pocketbook for our teachers is minimal. We had a bill to give a $250 tax break for teachers if they were buying supplies that they needed in the classroom, and that couldn't even succeed. So we still do not do a good enough job supporting teachers financially, certainly with the demands that we have for them for standards of learning. The solution in the General Assembly right now has been a stopgap that I think will help by making some changes to teacher licensures, so that if you are coming in, especially in where our military installations are, and you were a teacher in another state, but then as a military family you're moving to Virginia, well, we're not going to qualify that as a valid Virginia teaching license for a provisional amount of time, so you don't have to go through a huge process before you can actually get into a classroom. But these are just ways to try and reduce our shortage. But we still go into every single school year, as you all know, with about a 900 person teacher shortage all throughout the Commonwealth. Back in the 70s, we did 10% over 3 years. I think we should do it again. We need to figure out a way to pay for it, but we need to do it again. And I think that there are a few different ways that we're trying to figure out where to come up with the money to be able to pay for that. That wouldn't affect the pocketbooks of families here in Montgomery County. I think that we can do it by making it a priority, and that's kind of where we are now post Medicaid expansion is it really is, where's the prioritization now for some of the major issues moving forward. And I was even quoted in the newspaper of saying that my next main issue after Medicaid expansion is teacher salaries.
Now, the only question I had, when you were talking about the transport of people by sheriff's departments and all, you said maybe it would go to a private provider, okay, type situation. Localities would still be responsible for paying for that, correct?
So this would be,
how would it work
for the private individual, for the private company that would be doing that? This would be state paid by grants that the local CSB would apply for.
Okay, and so that would work as long as the grants were in place.
And the grants are in place for the biennium. I think it's 2.5 for fiscal year 19, 4.5 for fiscal year 2020. Yes.
Okay.
And I have been told that because of the distances traveled,
Right.
Southwest Virginia would be a priority for getting those grants.
Good, because this has been an issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bowman.
Thanks, Chris, for everything that you do. I have a couple of questions. I agree with the tax revenues, online purchases. It's long overdue. In the spirit of Dr. Steger, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about what Commonwealth of Virginia is doing for Virginia Tech, our largest employer for the county.
So one of the great things that happened this legislative session for Virginia Tech is not something that will actually proximately affect us here in Blacksburg, but this cyber rights initiative I think could really be tremendous for the entire Commonwealth, and certainly Virginia Tech is going to be the anchor for this new initiative. It was a brainchild of Dr. Sands, who went to the House Appropriations Chairman, Chris Jones, and said, listen, if we're going to try and be in the market for Amazon's East Coast headquarters, and if other opportunities like that, substantially massive like that, are going to be coming down the pike, the biggest challenge that we face in Virginia right now is having those qualified degrees ready to go to be able to provide those jobs that these companies need if they're going to be doing the relocation. We also saw what we did with the Metro funding, finally solving that with a dedicated funding source for Virginia's part of Metro funding up in DC, is a way of ensuring that we have viable public transportation. These big companies, they want quality of life amenities. From what I have gathered, they want quality of life amenities, good public transportation, great schools, and they need the qualified workforce. So CyberX would be using part of the Human Center and using some of the other facilities that are up in Northern Virginia for Virginia Tech as kind of a feeder hub for internships. So the way it would work is you would be here at Virginia Tech for 2 years. You would go up to Northern Virginia for 1 year, and then to do your final year, you could either stay in Northern Virginia or come back down to Blacksburg. And so you could go up there and you could be immersed in what I think will start to become a real technology hub, similar to what we see in California and in the Pacific Northwest, if we can get Amazon to come. And so regardless, it will still be something that is going on whether we get Amazon or not. And Virginia Tech had to fight with a couple of other major institutions over who would get to essentially be the anchor institution, but this would actually qualify for any student at a public institution in Virginia to be able to at least take that intern year up in Northern Virginia, but you would be going to Virginia Tech. if you were going up to Northern Virginia. Even if you were a George Mason student or a BCU student, you'd still go to Virginia Tech's campuses, their facilities, in order to get that education.
Or a community college student could do that too.
I'm not positive. Is that your understanding?
No? I'd like to know.
I don't believe so. No, I believe that you'd have to be matriculated at one of the public colleges and universities for the Commonwealth, but not part of the community college system. I think because of the degrees that you would have to already be on track for, and what degree or certifications you'd be getting at the community college and how they may be different, but I'm not sure.
Thank you about that. The opioid epidemic and the costs to our healthcare burden our healthcare system here locally, as well as drug courts and just help for the people who find themselves as addictive. Not a lot coming from the state. Is there?
Well, so a lot of stuff was done at the state prior to me coming into office. Things like prescription monitoring programs and what we're actually going to be doing to making sure that pharmacists and doctors are talking to one another better of what prescriptions and how many pills are actually out there. I think investments in telemedicine and telehealth will really help with long-term pain management and making sure that even if you can't go see your specialist in Roanoke, if you live in Montgomery County, you can still go to a remote clinic and be able to still have your pain management be effectively handled without having to make that journey, where then a lot of people then stop going and then they get diverted into some other bad path.
But the buprenorphine and all the other stuff just isn't readily available for people in this locality, and all the programs that might be more available in larger cities and things like that.
Right, so we are making at least the Narcan, naloxone available for more people in more areas. That's Commonwealth-wide. And when you talk about Subutex and Suboxone and all of those other medications and Medicaid-assisted treatment, it is difficult to get in these areas. And part of the problem is providers being able to actually have a doctor in your area. And so while telemedicine and telehealth can work in some areas, and in the New River Valley is doing better than some far southwest Virginia and Coalfield counties on that, it is difficult to do. Even if you are on MAT and you're off of an opioid, it still means that you need to be effectively managed because those medications, you need to be in good consult with a physician in order to make sure it's being done effectively.
Then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention MVP and DEQ. Could you talk to us about what you're doing and your fellow delegates in our area are trying to help us do, or what the limitations you're running into are?
So what's good, let's start with the good news, is that there have been violations that have been reported, I think, appropriately by DEQ, and there have been work stoppages that have been instituted by DEQ that I think have been appropriate, part of that because of emergency legislation that we passed in the General Assembly. One of the barriers toward this whole project as a whole is that the governor's administration is in support of the project. And until there's material evidence that shows in their mind that this project would adversely affect the people, waterways, land of the Commonwealth, it's going to continue. And so our office has been proactive in really, frankly, Supervisor Bowne, I'd have to say nominal things. We have been trying to fight the good fight and stand shoulder to shoulder, but you can only write so many letters to the governor and so many letters to DEQ when you start to get a diminishing rate of return on those letters you send. So what I've been doing more so than anything else is calling Director Taylor when there have been problems. He has been very prompt in getting back to me and with information. I've met with him several times. I continue to be in conversation with EQT, trying to push them to say that if this thing is going to come through, then there should be a tap in every locality in which it passes, and EQT should have to pay for it as a service to the localities that are impacted. I think an odorant should be added to the pipeline so that if there's a leak, that we would be able to smell it and not have an even worse potential disaster than if there was no odorant in it. They, though, by federal law, are not required to do much of anything, especially listening to localities. And I told them and DEQ that I wish that the communication between, especially DEQ and Montgomery County, was better. They seem to think that it was a choice that you all made. I tend to think that no matter what conflict of opinion or disagreement there may be about a project, that they still need to be giving you all timely updates and the opportunity to go out on site visits and being able to make sure that you all get the information that you're seeking in a prompt and timely fashion. And so I've been disappointed in that.
What in your wildest dreams would it take for our governor to see the light?
I don't think the answer exists. But I also wouldn't phrase it as having to see the light. I think that, as somebody who's a governor of nearly 9 million people, he has to make a decision that sometimes is in conflict with some of those 9 million people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll just reiterate half of what everybody said. I agree with the tax, internet sales tax. I haven't talked to Supervisor Biggs about this, but my wife's a teacher. She teaches 3rd grade. And I hear all the time, there's just not enough time in the day. So adding recess time, I do understand the kids need that. However, they struggle to get in what they need to get in to get decent scores on their SOLs, basically. And I'm going to plug a little bit here. My wife got 100% on her reading SOLs, and I think about 98% on her math.
That's good.
That's pretty awesome.
It is. So I don't know. I'm not looking for an answer. I guess I'm just throwing it out there because
I
it
think
doesn't make sense that you'd add time when they're not in the classroom during school day.
I apologize to interrupt, but I will say that this is not, once history is done and once math's done, they send the kids out on to the meadow, and then we wait until it's dinner time. This is taking very fixed hours and just basically trying to give more flexibility to our school divisions. I hear you though 100% about all of the extra duties and tasks and responsibilities we place upon our teachers with no planning periods to be able to do it. And when planning periods have been taken away, it's different from when I was in school, and you would go and it would be one of your free periods, and you'd go and you'd check in with your math teacher, and he was on or she was on their planning period, and so you could actually go into their room and talk to them if you needed to talk to them. But now they're stretched to the max, and it's always something to do one after another. And I think big picture, it would be great if we had total complete SOL reform, where we gave more local control for what we're actually going to have as our standards of learning Commonwealth-wide, because I think our ability to communicate what those standards are and making sure that people are in compliance is good enough now than where it was back in the early 70s. So if we can change the way we do standardized testing that really makes sure that the local needs are addressed by our local school divisions, then I think we might be able to add some extra time flexibility, not just for our kids to go and run around, but for our teachers to plan to teach our kids what they went to school to get that passion to teach, instead of just teaching kids how to take a test.
Right. I agree with that.
Yes, sir.
And one more point about your $250 tax break for teachers for buying supplies out of their pocket. That don't even scratch the surface of what my wife spends.
Right?
Well, in excess of $500 a year.
I bring it up only to say that even a nominal gesture is difficult to pass.
Yeah.
And that's a shame, but something that, I enjoy the privilege of getting to bang my head against the wall for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've just got a couple of questions, and I think the other supervisors have touched on it, and then we're going to be working on our legislative agenda. We wanted to get it to you early on, then have that dinner so you have an opportunity to be able to work on your bills, to take into what our input is in regards to those. In regards to liquor by the drink, right now, to be able to get it countywide, I think in Montgomery County it would be over 6,000 people we would have to get signed on a petition.
Yeah.
The citizens is just still putting it on the ballot. If you could make it where the locality could put it on, the four of us could vote to put it on the ballot, then that still allows the citizens to be able to make that decision. And that makes a whole lot more sense. In larger localities that don't have liquor by the drink now, I can't imagine how you're going to get 6, 8, 10, 12, 13,000 petitions, because the financial incentive is very, very difficult to be able to collect that many. And so that might be a way of at least getting it on the ballot, that at least the citizens trust us enough that they voted for us in, and that would just be us voting to put it on the ballot.
Well, I appreciate you saying that and describing that narrative, because that's a narrative that has also been described to me by a local landowner in Giles County on the other end of it. She owns a farm and is trying to do like a cool moonshine distillery, kind of event space that I think would be a great place to go spend a night. And she came to me and said, would you be able to do another, liquor by the drink bill? I mean, and if you talk to Mr. Meadows, I mean, it was on life support for a little while there because they didn't want to do it because leadership in the General Assembly hates that we keep, it's called a Christmas tree bill now, because we enacted this as part of the code, and now it's a Christmas tree, and every delegate and senator comes along every year and puts a little ornament to get their little piece of land in their district to get, one of these special liquor licenses. I completely agree with you. I think that there would be two complicating factors. One would be the General Assembly giving you guys the ability, making it permissive.
Well, and again, but not saying that we would be able to make that decision, just saying that we would be able to vote to put it on the ballot to let the decision being made by the voters.
I see. You'd be able to vote for referendum.
So they would not have to go through to getting the petitions together to get all those signatures, but 4 of us, or when localities that have 5, 3, would be able to make that decision, just simply put it on the ballot, not for us to make the final decision. Trust the voters. And the second aspect of it, you had mentioned making a gesture is very important, and sometimes, I know that there was the gerrymandering bill that went through and that got vetoed. And for us here in Montgomery County, I think we have one of our districts, Senate districts, has 3 residents in that district. We have continually put that on the ballot. Your district is stretched oddly, and you did well, you were successful, but I don't know that there's a lot of citizens in downtown Blacksburg that share a lot of the exact same interests as the citizens in downtown Rich Creek. And so compacting those districts obviously is something I think that should be a bipartisan issue. What do you think about, Supervisor Bowden said, what do you think it would change the governor's mind on MVP? What do you think it would take to change the governor's mind in regards to ending the gerrymandering that we see, and it's frankly it's been both sides. I remember when Ward Teal had the district run down 81 to encompass his house, and I know that we've had those type of things in regards to the Republicans doing the same thing. And so, what do you think the answer is?
Well, I think the answer is independent redistricting with nonpartisan criteria. I think that what you're referring to are the Senate bills that the governor made recommendations on, but then later vetoed. And the question was why would you veto bills that otherwise seem to be pretty good? And the answer is that they didn't go far enough, and we want a total and complete package. Now, I can see where people would think that that doesn't pass muster. And if people think that, then I think they're entitled to that belief. We did pass, a law that said now that localities can't go around changing precincts until after we do redistricting, as a way of trying to get some of this mess out of here. But in my district, in District C, in parts of Christiansburg, in some of my voting precincts, I have 10, 12, 14 voters in that, and then it's all, the rest of it's either Greg or Nick. I get it. Now, back at the beginning of the decade, you could maybe make an argument that my district had more communities of interest than it currently does. I think that there's been some tremendous change demographically in this district over the past 10 years or so. I will be frank with you, Chairman. Independent redistricting and getting legislators out of the business of drawing their own lines is going to be a very, very difficult hill to climb. And that's why you take that first step. We've seen some folks make some courageous first steps in taking, and sometimes it's not the whole journey.
but you take that first step and you get a ways. And so for us, when we start talking about our ballots and then trying to inform our citizens where they're supposed to vote, and we've got 14 people voting, 14 houses voting for you, but 582 houses voting for someone else, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it costs us tens of thousands of dollars to get prepared for that. And that's money that could be helping Daryl's wife be able to buy her school supplies. And so those are the type of things that seem to be easily fixed. We don't want, and at least in my mind, having 3 houses, let's say that only one person votes, then everybody is going to know exactly how that person voted, and the sanctity of the ballot, secret ballot, is lost. And so when you start having those small districts, we start
In primaries.
No. All right, think about this. Senator Chafin.
Yeah, right.
So if only one person votes in an off election year,
Yes, sir.
and then you can check to see who voted, and then you can check to see how many votes came in that precinct, and then you know exactly how that person voted.
Sure.
And, to me, part of America is, you pull the curtain and nobody knows how you voted.
I agree.
So those are a couple of the issues. Again, I believe my fellow supervisors addressed the others. I'd like to thank you again.
I have one more thing to add.
If you let me finish, just
Okay.
1 second. Your predecessor did it. You're doing it, and I greatly appreciate that. You have been very receptive. You met with us when our delegation came down. You spent a great deal of time with us, and I was very appreciative of the attention on very tight time frames that you gave us. Thank you. And now Supervisor Mix.
Just anything you can do as far as Interstate 81 safety issues, just keep, whether you're talking to your federal buddies or anyone else, because, we're trying to, there's a group that's going to be put together, I guess, to address these. So anything like that, because you are up and down it, you know how it is.
Yeah, if anybody's got $2 billion in their it will be, 81 is going to have to be a state and federal solution. I have already heard some whispers about tolling being one of the predominant measures in Virginia of where people want to go. I'm not in favor of that, because I think we have unique challenges in Southwest Virginia for tolling, kinds of vehicles we would be tolling, and then where would they go? Would not be creating the kinds of solutions that putting a toll in 81 would hope to try and address. I think there are some, driver modification things that we can continue to try out. We've had measures that were introduced that would ban trucks from the left lane. That's a consideration. I think the thing that folks in the Roanoke Valley and New River Valley really should look for in the next 5 to 10 years, if I'm being conservative, is doing 3 lanes all the way from here to Roanoke. I think that would be a really good first step, because also, as much as you all have traversed 81, and many who are watching and here in the audience, and I have, 81 is also not just one interstate in Virginia with the same problems all throughout, right? So there are parts of Interstate 81 south of Wytheville that are generally fine until you get to some areas, but particularly where we have with the mountain, Christiansburg Mountain, and then Botetourt, trying to get up through Botetourt County is really a challenge, and it's really, quite frankly, very dangerous. And I have really tried to make one of my priorities, though, is really trying to figure out what can we do for truckers. That's we have a lot of truckers who live in this district. They spend more time on the road than anybody else, which, as a former reporter, I tend to think they probably then have a lot of opinions about it and a lot of ideas. And so we've been already reaching out to the American Trucking Association, the Virginia Trucking Association, about doing ride-alongs. There's actually a guy who lives in Galax who is kind of their ambassador, and so he's willing to kind of take me and drive me up and down 81 and tell me what it's really like, because now they have new ELD mandates with this electronic logging devices that came in at the federal level, and some truckers really believe that is part of the problem that we're seeing now with them having to pull over in our rest stops and fill up our rest stops. You go to other states, you see people handle interstate traffic in different ways. I don't think we've handled Interstate 81 in as novel or clever or really just proactive ways as some other states have, and I certainly would like to see that change.
Well, speaking of novel and clever ways to address, our next presentation is Rail 2020 with Kevin Bird. And Chris, thank you very much. I hope you'll stick around and watch some of that presentation.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chairman Kevin is here, but I'm Larry Hinker, and I'll be doing the presentation for
I'm
the...
sorry, I apologize.
It's okay.
And it was right there on my agenda the whole time.
You know, many of you know, and many of the people here in the room know what my former job was, and that was the spokesperson for Virginia Tech. And I had to bite my tongue for 30 years often when I got before the camera, and now I have the pleasure of writing a column for the Roanoke Times, and just about every topic that you guys talked about I've written on. Not least of which was gerrymandering. And the only thing I'm going to say about gerrymandering is candidate Northam said that he would not sign a redistricting bill unless it came from an independent commission. So Delegate Hurst is right. I think the solution there is an independent commission. But let's talk about rail. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to you. Many of you are involved in this. Of course, Craig is intimately involved. The county is intimately involved. You're one of the partners in this effort. The goal of the New River Valley 2020 is really quite simple. We want passenger rail service for the New River Valley. And the reason is that we are really at the tail end of the great wagon road that runs through the Shenandoah Valley. And this area has traditionally and continues to look north. We're not that far from our nation's capital. And Interstate 81 that we just got through talking about lays on that old great wagon road. And so what our goal is to try to get the Amtrak Northeast Regional Service to come to the area. The background, again, you folks touched on it. There is increasing demand around the nation for passenger rail service where they're being implemented. Tremendously successful. We'll talk about Lynchburg in just a second. The congestion on the interstate highways, we've all been there. I just came back from New England last week, and it was a white knuckle trip for, about 500 or 600 miles from one end of Interstate 81 to the other. But the other thing about rail is it hits the sweet spot for that long distance travel. If we're going to go from here to Richmond, we're going to go here to Charlottesville, we're going to get in the car and we're going to go. If we're going to go from here to Chicago or to Denver or Los Angeles, we can get in an airplane. But if you're going to go to Philadelphia or Washington or New York, that's in that sweet spot where rail makes an awful lot of sense, particularly in the Northeast corridor where you have population densities. So we think rail makes an awful lot of sense. The Amtrak extended, of course, their service from Charlottesville to Lynchburg in 2009. It was a tremendous success right from the start. I think you know that the state set aside a subsidy to be able to underwrite the cost of extending that service, and they never had to touch a dime. And part of the reason was this pent-up demand. Part of the reason was people from Roanoke were using it, people from the New River Valley were using it. And so it was a financial success that showed the state that the western part of the state, beginning with Lynchburg and then of course later Roanoke and hopefully the New River Valley, will be supported in order, or rather will support the rail service right from the beginning. As you know, of course, October 31st, Halloween of last year, the rail service began in downtown Roanoke. It was an effort just like ours. It was a significant community-wide effort. And our effort is a significant New River Valley-wide effort. I do have some numbers for you that I don't think these have been published yet, but the DRPT has posted on its website the ridership for the first 7 months, exclusive of that one day in October. But the first 7 months, the on and off ridership, so they count boardings and deboardings, and they call riders on, riders off, was about 32,500 on-offs. So in that 7-month period, then, that's an average of about 4,600. You divide that in half, it's about 2,400 people getting on, about 2,400 people getting off every month. And we're told that that is meeting or exceeding Amtrak's, Kevin, I think we used the word expectations. They haven't really told us what their projections were, but generally speaking, and I have had an opportunity to talk to Amtrak personally a couple of times, generally speaking, they are happy with the service as it's been being used in Roanoke. So our effort, as I mentioned, every single municipality in the region, Pulaski County, Montgomery County, Radford, Virginia Tech, the Regional Commission, Honorary NRV, are all participating in this thing. Delegate Hurst has been wonderful. He participated immediately. And John Edwards, of course, Senator Edwards, was instrumental in getting the rail service into Roanoke. They've been actively involved, as have Congressman Griffith and Senator Kane with our effort. Some have been actually to our meetings. And this is just a list of all the people, as I just mentioned, that are involved with the organization. I want to talk just a little bit about some of the milestones. We've made an awful lot of progress. We kicked off in December 2013, so that was just a little over 4 years ago. We've had 3 legislative receptions. Many of you have been to those. Very significantly successful as far as we're concerned. We've engaged, though, very, very well with the Department of Rail and Public Transit. They have personally told us, Kevin and I visited with them, Kevin's still here, right? Last December, and they said to us, you guys are doing everything right. You're getting your community engaged, you're doing your legwork, you're doing your market research, and they've been very complimentary, as has now Secretary of Transportation, Shannon Valentine, been complimentary about the way that our community has come together, because that's the way it needs to be done. As you know, of course, it was endorsed by the MPO. And then the key thing is that we lobbied for this thing called an operational study. There's $350,000 in the fiscal 19 budget, of course the budget that began earlier this month, for an operational study that will be under the auspices of the TRPT Rail Division. That would actually be money, though, that would be given to Norfolk Southern, and I'll talk about that just in a second. We were hopeful that that would get off the ground as soon as the fiscal year began, but really the Department of Rail and Public Transit and Amtrak want to see a little bit more time on the Roanoke service to see what those boardings and deboardings look like before they engage in that study. And I'll talk about that in just a second, about what that is. Under the auspices of the Regional Commission and Kevin Bird specifically, we did a demand study that showed about 40,000 boardings a year could be out of the New River Valley. The Roanoke estimate, by the way, just for point of comparison, was 48,000. Amtrak's looking for a minimum of about 20,000. So we believe, at least according to our market survey that the Regional Commission did, that we could support those boardings that Amtrak needs. I mean, it's no secret we're the home to 2 very, very large universities. Having been engaged very intimately with that one university for a very long time, I can tell you that about half of our students come from the Northeast Corridor, starting with Northern Virginia and all the way up into Maryland and New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And that's half of about 30,000 people. That's a lot of folks, that's a lot of families, that's a lot of alumni. 100,000 people coming down to Virginia Tech alone. So we believe that in addition to, of course, those of us that live here and have business up in the Northeast Corridor would support that. I don't need to tell you guys, of course, that we remain a fast-growing county, now the 2nd largest county in the western part of the state. Norfolk Southern, the purpose of the operational study really is to look at infrastructure. Quite frankly, Norfolk Southern is not necessarily a willing bride in these things. And they run a rail line, and it's difficult for them to put passenger service on their rail lines. And so the purpose of the operational study is to take a look at where you need sidings, where you need improvements. And the state invested significant amount of money at Norfolk Southern's request to improve the rail lines between Roanoke and Lynchburg and Charlottesville. And that's what this operational study will do. And as I mentioned, it probably will not get underway until later in the fiscal year rather than early in the fiscal year, as those of us in the New River Valley 2020 would have hoped. I'm going to move pretty quickly through these. I'm not going to belabor this, just to say that the MPO and the Regional Commission did an excellent job of looking at every possible site location in the New River Valley. They had a total of 29 potential locations. They ended up with 6 that they really evaluated seriously: Pulaski, Dublin, Radford, and Christiansburg. It really, in the end, came down to Christiansburg and Radford. Radford, frankly, is a better location in terms of the infrastructure and the facility. From a market demand standpoint, it doesn't make any sense because you're going in the wrong direction if you're going north. And the people that would be using it are here in Christiansburg and in Blacksburg. And so the Radford location, even though that it made sense from the infrastructure standpoint, couldn't be supported from the market demand standpoint. And that's the reason why it ended up here in Christiansburg. And of course, as you know, it's going to be on that site currently that's adjacent to the aquatic center. The land was available. Christiansburg has already started buying it up, has already started purchasing parcels of it. It's very, very near the 460 interchange, and it makes an awful lot of sense. The site configuration is, you can see there, it's a possible site configuration. And again, these were conceptuals from a presentation that Kevin put together probably about 6 or 8 months ago. They're moving along a little bit further. As a matter of fact, literally just Friday, the group that you're on, Craig, the operations and maintenance, the ownership and maintenance subcommittee of NRV 2020 is taking a look at you know, what this body ought to look like that's going to run this thing. Is it going to be owned by the locality? Maybe not. Is it going to be an authority? Yeah, possibly. And so they put an RFP on the streets to have an engineering analysis done on the site to do two things. One, to take a look at a conceptual location, at a conceptual idea of what the facility would look like, and also some order of magnitude estimates of cost. And that's something that we've really not talked about a lot about yet, but ultimately that's where we as the local community participates financially. The state would make infrastructure improvements on the rail, but it's the localities that would need to pay for the station. And so Craig's group is looking at how you would pro rata share that, all different kinds of opportunities that will be coming out of their group. That, as I understand it, we hope to finish that work by this fall. And we're very, very hopeful that at that point then we'll have some idea of what the cost of the community might be. Hopefully then the operational study will be underway and the state can begin to get some idea of what the cost for the infrastructure improvements would be. And in some respects, I think I've already talked about most of this. I will say that Amtrak is a monolithic organization. And people told me, don't even bother to try to work with them. DRPT says, don't work with them. Well, I made inroads and I've met twice now with their marketing people. And they've been very, very helpful. They really, really like what we're doing here. It just so happens that one of the marketing guys was, yes, a Virginia Tech alum. So we had that in common. And I'm very happy to say that they've been supporting us. And they asked me to do a favor for them, by the way. And the favor was, they didn't particularly care for a 4:30 a.m. departure from the Smartway bus from the Virginia Tech campus. So I met with the Smartway Advisory Committee. Of course, as you know, the Smartway is run by the Valley Metro. And they have decided that it's a possibility that they could move that by a half hour. I don't know how many students are going to be getting on at 4:30 versus 5 o'clock in the morning. But the point being is that we're doing everything we possibly can in our region to try to help Amtrak put butts in seats and to try to help our community move forward to gain passenger rail service for the area. People always ask me, what can you do? And I say, ride the train. Amtrak and the state are looking at those riderships, those on and offs, boardings and deboardings, and that we need to show them that we support the rail. So that's about it, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. I blew through this as quickly as I could. I know that you had a very long and an important conversation with Delegate Hurst, but if you do have any questions for me, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Start off with Supervisor Fidzikowski.
No, I don't have any questions, but thank you.
Supervisor DeMons.
I don't have any questions either, but I am fully 100% behind your efforts. Very, very supportive of this, and I'm very excited to see that you're getting closer and closer and closer.
Thank you. Supervisor Biggs.
I'm excited about it too because I remember my mother telling me years ago when she could ride the train, you know, the Huckleberry train, when she was in Blacksburg. So this is about time that we got this back, and I think it's really going to be used a lot. I really, really do. I think once we get it and people get used to it, it's going to be great, and hopefully take some of the traffic off 81.
Please. Supervisor Bowman.
According to your numbers, 7 months, 32,500, that extrapolates to about 55,700 for a full 12 months. Have we seen a drop off? Like, was there a lot of ridership at the end of last year and maybe really light ridership, that they're concerned that we're not going to,
No,
we've already exceeded the
Yeah.
20,000 minimum that they
Yeah.
asked for,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, and actually, as I mentioned, Roanoke's projection was 48, so actually, I haven't even done that math, thank you very much. So that means, in that regard, then, it's exceeding their 48,000 projection. Amtrak told me that their ridership is seasonal, just like airline ridership. I mean, their numbers were very, very large for December, 6,229, and then January dropped to 4,189. And they told me they fully expected that. That's their normal traffic pattern. So if we're going to be up to an annualized rate of 55,000, I think that's a good number.
Even with the low number of January times 12 is 48,000.
There you go.
And you're going to be better than that, right? Okay. So what I don't understand is if you think that we're going to have 40,000 in the NRV, what really do you have to, how do you prove to them that you're going to have 40,000 in the NRV?
They know who's getting on the train in Roanoke. So, I mean, they've got the demographics. They know the zip codes.
Okay.
And so they'll be looking at that and extrapolating.
So when we pull our people back, what will happen in Roanoke? Their ridership will go down.
There'll be a cannibalization of sorts, yeah, for sure. And of course, if anybody's done any, market analysis and cannibalization, the objective is to make sure that your net is more than what you've cannibalized.
Okay. A little confused by what you talked about. I understood initially one of your earlier slides about the operational study, and then you talked about it a couple other times later on. The part that I didn't understand is you talked about the operational study reviewing the Roanoke to Lynchburg to Charlottesville, and I'm expecting that you meant not our operational study, but some other one.
Right. So in other words, each of those initiatives, they were separate initiatives, had its own operational study, and then from that operational study came a number. And it's not an insignificant number. Kevin and I were talking about, we think the Roanoke infrastructure number was somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million. And that's where the state comes in. And that's why the state, through DRPT and Norfolk Southern, have to come to an agreement.
So in other words, the state is subsidizing it. $80 million is a big subsidy.
The improvements.
Right.
Right.
Do we have any idea what ours will be?
No, that's why I said
Okay.
we're anxiously awaiting that
Okay.
operational study.
And then lastly, are we the end of the line? Will we be end of the line that we need to turn this train around? How does that work?
Well, that's an interesting point, because I did neglect to mention that Bristol is very, very interested. Now, Bristol is a long, long way away. But they've been hammering the state, and so the state has said that they're going to have a look. I don't know to what degree they're going to do the same order of magnitude analysis, but Bristol is going to be looked at. But we believe that we'll be the southern terminus just the way that Roanoke is the southern terminus. Because as soon as you start talking about Bristol, you're talking about another couple of hours, and it's a whole different order of magnitude. I mean, at that point, they're leaving the day before. You know?
But I mean, I've been up there. My mother took it in. She's one of the December rides. But I don't remember, did it just come into the station and then go out the same way? It didn't go through the station.
If you're going to Washington,
Yeah.
if you're deboarding in Washington, you actually, you take a Y and you go into Washington. If you're going up the Northeast Regional, you skip it. My wife visits my son in Connecticut, go up to Bridgeport, and she never even goes through Washington, D.C., through Union Station. So the trains separate. Of course, she was going southbound, so the train separates north of Washington.
I guess what I'm saying is the train that comes into the Roanoke station, leaves the Roanoke station, does it go back? So it comes in from the north and goes out north, or does it come from the south and just keep continuing
no, I'm
north?
sorry. It starts in Roanoke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they don't turn it around there.
No.
They just go backwards or something?
No, they do turn it around
Oh, they
in
do.
Roanoke. There's a turntable
Yeah.
at Schaefer's Crossing, but also the reason that it got placed there, as I understand it, and Kevin, is because they needed to be able to turn it around without having an impact on Norfolk and Southern's operations.
I see.
And so there was a lot of improvements that had to be made to the tune of
So-
millions of dollars.
So they're going to have to turn it around in Christiansburg.
Well, and indeed, those are some of the things that they need to talk about. That's one of the reasons why
Okay.
Radford would have been a much better location,
okay.
because Radford's got the turnaround.
Okay.
And so if it does come here to Christiansburg, then they're going to have to look at the kind of things that Chairman
I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Supervisor King?
No questions.
Couple of things. I was the butts in the seat in December or January, and then again in April. It's a great way to travel. And New York is cheap in January. It's cold, but the theater is good, and especially I was able to get hotel rooms in January for $109 in Manhattan. And so I would encourage folks to, that's a great time to travel because people aren't traveling, and if you're going to be inside, it's not that bad. So thank you very much for being here this evening, and we'll do our best. By the way, if we're going to make a station, do you think with your connections to Virginia Tech, we could get some Hokie Stone for that station?
You know, yeah, I think I might be able to help a little bit on that. Although Tech, of course, as you know, is a fully engaged partner in this effort.
So, well, exactly. Well, thank you again very much.
Thank you, Larry.
The next presentation we have is Virginia Tech Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, and Mark Blanks is the director of the Virginia Tech Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you tonight. And thank you for your service, all of you. Especially Supervisor Shepherd. My daughter was one of your wife's students last year. So one of those statistics, and we really enjoyed her. So thank you very much. So I'm here today to brief you about some of the activities that we have going on with the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, which is what I call the MAP. It's a lot easier to say, not quite as much of a mouthful. And we'll be talking about drones. And this is what I would consider to be an introductory briefing, and it's mainly a communications outreach that we want to hopefully continue with more dialogue in the future. So please just see this as an initial discussion. And I came here in 2015 to take over the test site, which we'll talk more about, and I just say that this county is an absolutely wonderful place to live, and really appreciate the work that y'all are doing. So I'd like to start my presentations off with a kind of bold statement, and I think I believe in this fully. I believe that drones will change our experience, our daily experience, and I believe that will be a positive change, and that's what we're working to make sure that it is. But I want to just talk to you about some of the ways that will happen and what we're doing about that and how this may impact our communities. So first of all, drones will change our experience through things like package delivery. So we did a test with what was part of Google, Alphabet's Project Wing, that did package delivery with Virginia Tech at the Transportation Institute back in 2016. And we have continued to work with them since. But this is a great example of how drones are very different than manned aviation. Manned aviation, you usually interact, you go to the airport, you fly somewhere, you go point to point. You don't interact with them in your backyard. You don't interact with them daily. In this case, drones are an entirely new way of interacting with people and with the public. And that our focus is that interaction be positive and productive. The package delivery is one where you might absolutely see a change in your daily experience because you can now get a good in 5 minutes versus 30 minutes or hours or even days. There's a lot of examples of this. We did deliver food back in 2016. But the same thing, if you can deliver food, you can probably deliver an AED, you can deliver prescription medication, you can deliver almost any kind of good that would fit in that package. So it's not just about food, it's about other things you can deliver. I'll just give you a quick example that I love to use. I have had many occasions with my daughter, or I have multiple kids, sorry, that out at town and found out that we didn't have a diaper in the bag. I would pay $20 to have a diaper delivered by a drone. So just an example. You can only imagine what you could use a drone for. Other ways that it might impact your daily experience, insurance claims. So this is an example of how long does it take to recover from a hailstorm or from a tornado or from a major disaster. When there's a lot of claims at one time, this is usually done manually. They go and they walk up on a roof and they do an assessment of damage. We can do this now from the air. And we can do this rapidly over a large area. So you can see a claim time that might change from weeks to days or even less. And so some of the work we're talking about will address that exactly. traffic management. What a great session to talk about traffic management, because I think this has come up at least 5 times tonight. With the I-81 corridor and other things, traffic is obviously a huge problem. Imagine how long it takes for when I-81 shut down because of a major wreck in the forensics and the analysis that happens after that. We have studies right now that we're working with the BDOT and with VTTI on how to do forensic analysis quicker to clear the roads quicker. So it could be a case like that, but it could also be a case where, there are unusual traffic situations. Think of ball games at Virginia Tech or other things where you just want to know where is the congestion, where are the choke points, and we can do this real time. It's another way to impact you personally. And this last one's may sound like a bit of a stretch, but it's coming actually sooner than you might think. Personal air transportation, or what we call urban air mobility, is the idea of basically on-demand transportation for just a few short miles. Right now, it's not economical to do this with a helicopter. It's actually way too expensive. But now with the technology, you might have a situation where a ride-sharing service like Uber or Lyft would you would call your transportation, and it would show up in either air or a car format you choose. You hop in, no pilot on board, by the way. Hop in, take off, and the aircraft delivers you to another location. All done with electronic motors, which are much quieter than a helicopter. That is a little ways off. And this, quite frankly, there's the certification of the autonomy part of that is part of it. But within the next decade, I predict you'll probably see personal air transportation. So anyway, but all these things are ways in which, just examples of way that drones will change your daily experience. Now, what are we doing about it? So the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, or MAP, has 2 different designations. One we've had for a while. We're a FAA US test site, which we were awarded back at the end of 2013. Became operational in 2014, and so for the past 4 years we've been doing drone testing at Virginia Tech as an FAA site. And I'll talk more about the details of that, but there were 6 other sites across the country distributed, as you can see on the map here. And this recently in May, President Trump, actually last fall, President Trump asked the DOT to create a new program to look at how local and state regulation played into drone regulation. And that was called the Integration Pilot Program, and it was a competitive bid for that, which we were selected for in May of this year. So there's 10 sites selected, and there's only 3 of those sites that are both a test site and an Integration Pilot Program, and we're one of those 3. The other 2 are North Dakota and Alaska. So we'll talk more about the details of that, but it's a pretty big coup in the feather, or big feather in the cap, for this region to have both of these. You'll notice that it says that Virginia is the Virginia Innovation and Entrepreneurship and Investment Authority. That is the umbrella for CIT, or the Center for Innovative Technology. That is who is the entity that it was awarded to, but we, Virginia Tech, are the operational arm of that. We're doing the research. We're doing all the work down here, so in your region. So just briefly about what those 2 different programs are. So the test site is a very general, open-ended program that allows us to test drones for a whole host of different reasons. What we have ended up evolving to these days is basically we help companies build a safety case for their application or for their projects or for their use case. The safety case means basically we look at all the risks, what could happen, and we mitigate those risks with different means. It could be technology, it could be new ways of operating, higher altitudes, whatever it might be. But basically we help companies make things safe, and that is our priority. And then we also test a lot of the latest and greatest technology. So there's some of the most leading edge technology in the country is happening here. And then we do that by combining our work with Virginia Tech and the research faculty there as well. But that happens all in a test environment. That is testing in a test environment, and a lot of it happens in Kitland Farm, if you know where that is. But a lot of it happens around the state. We have flights going on routinely in different regions and actually across the country. The Integration Pilot Program, though, is very different. You'll notice the first bullet is it does the same thing. We're working with companies to prove things are safe. The second piece of that, though, is really talking about how do you enable the next generation of operations in a community? How do you go beyond the test environment? And that's where y'all are going to come in, especially looking at how the state and local government is involved in the regulation of drones. The FAA just, I think it was Friday, issued a new memo about who owns the regulation of drones, and basically saying that they own that regulation, but they want the feedback and the input from state and local entities. And so the purpose of this project is exactly that, to gain together input from the communities about what the concerns are and how to address concerns with drone operations. Because it's coming. There will be some numbers if needed, but there's a lot of evidence that it's coming. So that is the two different programs. The other thing about the IVP, or the Integration Pilot Program, is it's very narrow. It is specifically only for a couple of projects, not broad and open-ended. And we actually have 3 projects within that we'll be working on. The 3 are package delivery, once again with Wing, which is part of Alphabet, is our primary partner there, as well as linear infrastructure inspection, which is working with Dominion Energy and looking at how we can assess damage quickly after storms or do routine maintenance regularly and reduce cost and increase safety. And then the last one is we're working with State Farm on post-event damage assessment. So how does State Farm, or how do you do insurance assessment like I mentioned earlier, especially over a broad scale? Those are the 3 primary projects. But I want to dive into one of those just a little bit more in detail, and that's specifically the package delivery project. And what you see on the screen is a map that shows an area that covers Montgomery County as well as Roanoke County and up into Botetourt County. This is a very general overview of when we proposed to the FAA back in December, we would like to do these different activities, these different projects in this area. We also proposed 4 other areas across the state. But this is the one in this region. And so this is not meaning we're going to do package delivery through this entire area. This is just meaning this is the airspace we wanted the FAA to look at. The airspace is shaped this way because it encompasses the airspace around the tower at the Roanoke airport. But then beyond that encompasses the counties, especially our county. So there's 3 goals, though, of this package delivery project. One is the integration research. And when I say that, that is how do we do this safely? How do we do this in a way that we know, the air traffic control knows what's going on, everybody knows all the different details. We worked through a lot of this already through our previous 4 years of work. But that is a big goal. When it's one thing to do it in a test environment, it's another thing when we start looking at doing it in a larger area. 2 is we want to get community engagement and feedback about what the community feels about what we're doing and what do they think about drone operations? Do they see a value? Do they see a concern? And we want to work with them to address those concerns as we move through the project. And then 3, we want to see what the economic development opportunities are. What could this do for the region? What could it do if we're one of the first places to have package delivery? And then what would that provide jobs or other benefits to other businesses around town? And then also, all this will be conducted with safety number 1. That has been the mantra of the FAA and it continues to be of our program as well. We basically follow a very rigorous safety risk management process, which I briefly hinted at before. But it will basically take every risk will be addressed in some way from a safety perspective. The goal here is to have a risk that is no higher than any person experiences any day, every day, all day. We don't want to increase the risk to the public, period. And I think we can prove that quite effectively. So that's first. Then also we'll have FAA and federal oversight that will approve all of our operations. So nothing's going to happen without first having FAA approval. But then there's 3 basic phases of this, and I'll just go ahead and answer now. We don't know the timelines of these. This is a negotiation process with the FAA, and then it's also a outreach process with communities, of which this, as I see, is one of the first steps as coming and talking to you. But the first is we'll do limited testing in a very small region beyond our normal test envelope, over our test areas, just to get some data points to help understand. And we'll do outreach that's appropriate for that level of testing. And then the next is we'll look at rural areas that will be ideal, mainly because population density is low first. And then once we have experience in that areas, then we'll see about moving to suburban areas. This program ends in 2020, so October 2020 currently. So we hope to accomplish all those by 2020, but there's all of this depends on FAA discussions, as well as the community feedback and outreach portions of it. So here today, I want to come and let you know this is the project that we're doing. We do intend to provide outreach to the communities as we move into the next phases of this. And as we have more definition, I'd like to have the opportunity to come back and brief you on the details of what those actual operations look like, if at all possible. And so with that, I just wanted to open it up to questions so you can understand what we're doing. And we want people to know when there's drones flying in their community about it well in advance. And that is the whole goal. We want to have feedback. We already have on our website a place for people to send us emails, comments, or concerns. And we'll be happy to receive those now, and we'll be addressing them as we move forward.
Start off with Vice Chair DeMoss.
It was Moe's Burritos that you had delivered, wasn't it?
Chipotle, sorry.
Chipotle.
Sorry.
All right, I knew it was burritos, I just didn't know the origin. I don't have any questions. I think this is very interesting, and to be quite honest, it's not something I deal with in my day-to-day life, so it's kind of a big picture concept for me to wrap my head around. I think it's very interesting, I think it's very exciting, and I'm glad that you're here in our area doing this research here. I appreciate the feedback and the continued opportunity to engage in dialogue with you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Biggs.
Well, I want to thank you for giving my board member report, because I was going to report that we had this presentation at the airport, so that, things came up with, like concerns and that kind of thing at our regional airport. But yes, I think it's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing exactly what you come up with as far as getting somebody on board to, want their product delivered sort of in a test way. I know that's one of the things you have to work on, right?
Yeah,
is getting a company on board, or
which companies participate?
yeah,
certainly that will be part of the process.
I think it holds a lot of potential. I'm still not understanding exactly what would a locality have in relationship to, an ordinance or anything like that. I'm sort of out there with that. I was going to ask our attorney. I'm not up to speed on how that all is supposed to be happening.
So there's time, place, and manner restrictions. So basically, the most common has been the complete drone ban. We've seen the people just say you cannot fly in these areas. Virginia has a law on the books that prevents localities from enacting those time, place, and manner restrictions for drones currently. But there's a lot of different flavors to that, and that's kind of our interest is really understanding that those drone bans have popped up because people had concerns, and they're probably legitimate concerns, and we need to address those concerns in an effective manner. So we want to understand what would be the concerns of the community, and then address those in a way that hopefully wouldn't result in a full ban.
Because it sort of opens up a lot of things like noise. I don't know how loud. I know some drones are louder than others, and privacy issues and that kind of thing. But I'll look forward to seeing what you do next.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Supervisor Bowman.
Couple of questions. So it's just a matter of time
Yeah.
before we have drones flying all over the place, I expect, right?
I think it's likely, but we're actually seeing that now. I mean, we see recreational users buying them down at Walmart or Best Buy and flying them routinely. Not commercial drone operations everywhere has not happened yet. But yes.
But it's just a matter of time
probably
before it
likely
is.
is,
So either we embrace it or we're a laggard.
Perhaps. I mean, I think yes. I mean, I think that concerns have to be addressed regardless. So I'd say it probably is a matter of time, but if the community does not accept it, then I don't think commercial operations are a matter of time necessarily.
Interesting. Along with Supervisor Biggs, is there a certain height that the drone has to fly so that you can't hear it? Airplanes have to go tens of thousands of feet and you can't hear them, right? Is that, what kind of height is that for a drone, or is there a
So it
height?
depends on the aircraft. On average, I'd say once they're 100 to 200 feet up, you probably won't hear them beyond that. But it does depend on the aircraft.
So initially, I was thinking that you're testing the drones that have 4 or more blades, but then I saw on one of your slides that one of them for the power lines was a plane. So you're doing all different kinds?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's different models that work better for different things. So linear infrastructure, we want to fly long ways, and the airplanes are more efficient than a multi-rotor aircraft is. The one that's on the left that's doing package delivery actually has 12 motors, lift motors on it, and 2 forward motors, and those are all smaller motors. It's actually a very redundant design.
Interesting. So in your map, you showed, a circle or partial circle around the Roanoke Airport. You don't have to do anything special around the Virginia Tech Blacksburg Airport?
So we have to coordinate. Well, we have to coordinate with the airport. The Virginia Tech Airport is an uncontrolled airspace. So above the ground, the airspace is actually controlled by the Roanoke Airport. And so we will coordinate with the approach there. We're also working with the airport to address any concerns there. So the airspace above the airport is a little different than because it doesn't have a tower on the facility. But the airport itself is uncontrolled technically. We will communicate and address any concerns. That's why I presented already to the airport authority, because we wanted to hear if there were any issues. And right now, we are not currently flying anywhere in the near proximity to the airport.
You're only flying in your netted thing.
No, we're flying outside the netted. We're flying either Kitland Farm or other test locations that are open. So the netted drone park is for operations that are actually on campus doing initial testing.
So for the different phases, how are you planning on notifying residents for privacy reasons, all that kind of stuff?
So that's something that we're working on now, and I think it's as mentioned on that last slide. There's 3 different types of areas we're going to be in. So I think it needs to be scaled appropriately, and so we're working now to identify who are the stakeholders. And the same method you might use for local testing may not make sense when we start talking about a large rural area. This is a first step. But we do plan to have other types of engagement, probably public meetings and open answers question sessions. There may be other tailored approaches, but we have communications people working specifically on that. We want to get the word out. We want to have an opportunity for feedback. Realize that everybody's not going to show up to a public meeting either. So we're looking at other venues to do so. Could it be flyers? Could it be other things? Let's say that's still in development currently.
And can any properties be off limits right out of the chute?
That's something that we would have to talk through with the FAA and with the community, I think. I don't think anything's out of the realm of possibility up front, but I think that's something we would work through as we develop the operational plan for the area.
I just came back from vacation out west, and one of the national parks had no drones, right? So there's got to be some opportunity to prevent drones from going over my home, for example.
And so what we're trying to do is trying to address what are the concerns that make you want to not have drones flying over your home, and how do we address these concerns versus just saying they're banned. Usually the concern that I hear personally, and I deal with this a lot, is people say, I don't want them spying in my backyard, or I don't want the nuisance or anything else. And typically the people that you're probably most concerned about are the recreational users or somebody that's not for commercial hire. What if you knew exactly what that aircraft was doing there? What if you knew exactly what that particular aircraft above you was doing, and where it was going, and what its purpose was in real time? That's an ability called remote identification, and it's something that we're working on with the FAA to help provide that. So if you knew that that was delivering your new iPhone 10, you might be okay with with it coming over your house. So I want to understand what the concerns are, and then work through with stakeholders like that to see how could we address that before we just start saying we want to ban all operations. And the example I like to use routinely is, if you had told me I would carry a tracking device on myself 24/7 10 years ago, I would have said absolutely no way on earth will I ever do that. But now I carry a smartphone around and it does exactly that. And it's really about value and about knowing what's being used for. And so we believe that technology and transparency and education can address a lot of these concerns. But we do want that feedback, absolutely.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shepard.
First, I'll say I own a drone.
All right.
I don't have any questions. One of the options, and I don't know if it would be an option about being able to tell what that drone is doing. I just recently downloaded an app for aircraft, and it'll track all the commercial airlines and tell you what they are, where they're going, where they've been. So I don't know, something like that anyway. And I saw a news article on one of the TV shows, I don't know, this past week. There's a company, I believe it was in California, is starting to build the personal flying drone, so you can get in it and ride.
Yep.
And it's gonna fly under the Part 103, the ultralight aircraft. And I was shocked at the price. The guy said, "How much is it?" And he said, "Not as expensive as you think. It's about the cost of your SUV." So, and it's a black fly was the name of it. But anyway, but thank you for your presentation.
I appreciate it, sir.
Supervisor Kenny.
No questions.
Supervisor Fidzikowski.
I don't have any questions, but this is a fascinating topic. I mean, it's in the news almost every day, whether it's looking at it to deliver packages or picking off a terrorist or across the world. But I really do hope you come back and report to us again on your progress. I don't think most citizens here know what exactly is happening right here in Montgomery County. I mean, I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to comment to that, I live in these communities myself too, and I have the same concerns I think that I hear from other people myself. And so appreciate what you said, and we're working to make this as productive as possible. It's better to be shaping the technology for good, is my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Folks, we've got a couple of public hearings that would be coming up next. I will say that those public hearings did not take very long in the Planning Commission. We can take a break now, but I know that some folks have been waiting a long time. So it really, I don't think that they're going to take more than 5 or 10 minutes. There was only one speaker in regards to Warm Hearth, and it wasn't necessarily in opposition, but that was regarding Mayberry Lane. There was no one who spoke in regards to the bed and breakfast issue.
So you want to do the 2 public hearings first
And it
before
seems
a
to be our
break?
biggest crowd, and then maybe take a 5-10 minute break after that. Is that all right, Supervisor King?
5 minutes.
That being said, the first public hearing that we've got to come up is specifically a request by Amy Long, and I may mispronounce this last name, Ebel? Ebel, thank you. For a special use permit on 205.706 acres to establish a commercial stable and bed and breakfast inn. The property is located at 5995 North Fork Road, Elliston, Virginia.
Challenge accepted.
Free?
Tonight we're actually looking at 2 special use permit requests on this property owned by Miss Ebel, located at 5995. It's in the eastern portion of the county, shown here in red. This is an aerial view of the property. You can see this is Route 11460. This is the Elliston Industrial Park, and this is North Fork Road. It's zoned agriculture A1, as is the surrounding property, except for the industrial park. And across Route 11460, there's some residential parcels and some general business. The Ebels have applied for permits for a house over top of a stable and for a garage, and that is a by right use, so those permits have been issued. In addition, they would like to construct 11,250 square foot commercial stable, which will be used for a riding rink and horse boarding. This is part of a larger phase plan for the property that will include some riding trails and a small event space and a bed and breakfast inn. The bed and breakfast inn would operate out of a second residential dwelling and a proposed cabin. The Montgomery County Code does limit that use to 15 guest rooms. So this is the plan for the property, and it's kind of hard to see. I apologize. Hopefully what you have on your screens is a little clearer, but I will point out this is the area for the commercial stable, the riding rink, the horse run-ins. This is the barn, the garage, and the house with stable below that they currently have a permit for. This is a future parking area, the existing farmhouse, and then the dotted lines through here that you see are the riding trails with an additional barn here. And there are also some horse run-ins scattered throughout the property. That's all related to the commercial stable. In relationship to the bed and breakfast, there's a second proposed residence here and a cabin up here. It is not known at this time if the new residence or the one that they're currently building will be used for the bed and breakfast. These are pictures of the property facing west on North Fork, and this is facing east on North Fork towards Route 11460. This is the entrance to the site that is a low volume commercial entrance. And then this is the industrial park across the street. This is an example of one of the horse run-in shelters with fencing. VDOT has confirmed that the existing low volume commercial entrance is sufficient for phase 1. Any additional phases may require an upgrade to an entrance and be evaluated during the site plan review process, which VDOT participates in. Water and sewer will be available through the Montgomery County PSA. They will have to install a septic tank, however, because they are part of the Elliston system. The property does line an area of steep terrain. Most of the property will remain wooded, and I'll show that on the next slide. They will still have to comply with any stormwater and erosion and sediment control regulations. So this is an aerial view of the property with the plan overlaid. And you can see here, most of the proposed construction is within areas that are already not wooded. So there will not be a whole lot of tree clearing. And the trees that are existing will provide a good buffer for surrounding properties. This is the future land use map for the 2025 comp plan. So there's actually 2 comprehensive plan maps that apply to this property. This is the main one for the comp plan. It's resource stewardship in green and village expansion. And then the village designation is broken down on the village map. The white is the resource stewardship, so it's kind of missing because it goes back to that main future land use map. This pale yellow area is low density residential, and this is medium density residential. So the supporting policy statements here, they do support agriculture and non-agricultural uses as long as they are compatible in scale and intensity with surrounding area. The commercial stable and bed and breakfast, they blend agriculture, residential, and commercial development all onto one site. And so it does provide for a transition area, and it offers a buffer from the industrial park that's across North Fork. Given that and the low impact on the surrounding properties, we have determined that the special use permits are in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The commercial stable will employ several people to care for the horses and maintain facilities on site. The bed and breakfast would be established at a future phase. It should be noted that all special use permits, if granted, are void within 2 years if they are not established. We have discussed that with the owners and the applicants, and they are aware of that time restriction. Staff recommended approval of the special use permit for a commercial stable to the Planning Commission with the 4 conditions shown on screen. We also recommended approval of the bed and breakfast inn with those same 4 conditions to the Planning Commission. We notified all adjoining owners according to Montgomery County Code. We did receive 1 phone call, however, it was just an inquiry. No concerns were stated, and no comments were made at the public hearing. The Planning Commission voted 6-0 to approve the commercial stable. And they recommended approval of the bed and breakfast inn as well on a 6-0 vote. And at this time, I will take any questions you have for staff.
Does anyone have any questions for staff?
I have one very small one. And this was uniform throughout, and I only bring this up because it could, there's a very small typo in the materials, and I only bring it up because it could, 20 years down the road, if they decide to sell it, could cause a problem.
Cause confusion?
It's under, I guess it would be the proffers, or it's hereby approved with the following conditions.
Okay.
Item number 2B, in addition to depiction on an approved site plan, any structure constructed at the special even area.
I see it should be event.
Yeah, and that was consistent through everything in our packet, so.
Okay.
That was the only thing that I had.
Any other questions? Did that spark any other questions?
Well, one thing, would they have to come back? You said they didn't know where they was going to put the bed and breakfast yet?
So they know where it would go in one of the 2 dwellings, but they can't exceed 15 guest rooms. So regardless of which house they choose, they're still limited to that 15 guest rooms, but they would not have to come back. That would all be dealt with administratively through a site plan review process.
So there's already structures there. They just don't.
There's 1 structure that's currently permitted. There is an existing farmhouse. My understanding it most likely will not remain. And then there is a proposed new residence that will be constructed later on towards the rear of the property. Let me go back to the plan.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to figure out how.
So their plan now is either to have the bed and breakfast in the structure they are currently building, which will have a house over top of stables.
Right.
Or in the future residence that's further back on the property.
Or build
I think they haven't decided where they want to live yet.
I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to vote on this if we don't know where it's going.
Well, as I understand it, that we would be approving the zoning, or the request, but the site plan, they would still have to submit a site plan to go administratively approved.
But we don't know where it's going. How can we vote on something we don't know where it's going?
We know where it's going, it's just not constructed yet.
And we don't
Oh,
know
I
which.
thought you said they haven't decided
We don't
yet.
know which structure they're going to use for the bed and breakfast, but
Well,
we
that's-
know where both structures are.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so we know where both structures exist. We're not sure which one they're using for the bed and breakfast. But the special use permit doesn't apply to the structure, it runs with the land.
Okay.
Any other
Does that
questions?
help?
There is no one signed up for this, and I know the applicant is here, but there's no one signed up currently for public address. That does not mean that you cannot speak. Anyone who would like to address the board on this issue, please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Steve Simoes of Balzer & Associates. I'm going to shorten my 30-minute presentation to about 2. But Mark and Amy Eagle approached us several months ago about this project. They're real excited about it. Amy has a family tie to this property. Mark has worked down in the Elston, Lafayette area for years, and they're horse enthusiasts, equestrian enthusiasts. I call them horse people. But they're excited about this. They got started and realized we needed to go through the special use permit process, so that's why we're here. We're moving through this, and I'll go back if I can. Just to answer Supervisor King's question. So this is the structure they're building right now will be their residence. So as we looked at this, we wanted to be sure if we had some special use permits and some uses they wanted to do, we kind of encompass them all in this one process and then come back in a couple months, because they do have some big plans. They've had a lot of interest from the Virginia Tech community, from the surrounding communities in Montgomery County and Roanoke County for boarding, for equestrian uses. And they're thinking they may employ up to 30 people over the course of this project. But these 2 structures that we have here, a future residence site, a future cabin site, a special event, those are the areas in those cleared areas, Supervisor King, that we're thinking some of those could occur. We've shown distances off of each of those to be sure that you all were able to see how far off property lines we were, the vegetation, so we weren't sitting a special event site right up against somebody's back door. And this wouldn't be somebody doing a big 400 or 500 person wedding. This would be other horse people that are associated with the facility that would maybe want to have a wedding there. They could stay at one of the bed and breakfast or the event centers overnight. Have a couple people there. So as we try to figure out what that use would be, working with staff is where we came up with that bed and breakfast, kind of a small event bed and breakfast special use permit, which is what we're asking for. But so they're excited about the project. We're just trying to get through that next step. So I'm here to answer any questions you all have, and Mark and Amy are here as well.
Do you have a question for the applicant?
Yeah, I just had, I'm not against this. I'm just concerned because, every Halloween we have a situation down there with this spook house or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was my concern.
Right.
About the neighbors.
I understand.
Because we get several emails every year around Halloween about that one situation.
Right. And I think the way we've got it set up right now, that special use permit would have to be, we'd get it tonight, we'd still go through the site plan process. Part of that use would be, what we're applying for tonight, and then over the course, I guess it would be through the zoning department to be sure we're staying in step with that special use permit as it's approved.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I didn't see anyone coming forward, so Marty, am I legal to go ahead and close the public hearing? All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And there is this matter up on new business since there was no one who spoke in opposition. The second, Bree, you're up again. That's what you get for going on vacation. All right, Greg, can I get some?
Okay. So this is a public hearing for another special use permit request, although it's a little different. This is an amendment to an existing special use permit. And this is for Warm Hearth Village. The amendment is to allow some additional construction there that was not previously on their master plan. It is located just to the south of the town of Blacksburg, north of Merrimack Road. This is the aerial view of the property. Everything in yellow are the subject parcels that comprise the entire Warm Hearth Village. You can see the western portion of the property is yet to be developed. The two buildings that they have proposed in their updated master plan are located in this area here that's central to the property. Site is zoned residential multifamily with 6.5 acres of general business central to the development. This is their revised master plan. Everything in yellow are the areas that's zoned RM1. Pink is general business, and this teal color is actually located in the town of Blacksburg. So they do have a little bit that goes to the town. My 5 minutes are not.
I tried to put on time 5 minutes.
That was a slight slip, sorry.
The gray structures are the new proposed structures that were not included on the previous plan. These two structures are referred to as Walnut Point Apartments. It's 36 apartment units. This is future administration offices and an IT building. These are just a couple of pictures. This is the entrance to Warm Hearth, Mabry Lane. This is the Warm Hearth Village Center, the Showalter Center, and this is the on-site healthcare center. Warm Hearth was founded in 1974. It's been to the board several times for special use permits and amendments in 1979, 84, 97, and 2006. The owners are wanting to construct 13 6-apartment units. Currently, the condition on the special use permit says that any development has to be substantially in conformance with the concept plan, which means staff has very little flexibility. If the building's not shown, we can't let it go there. If it's shown here, it's got to go here. It can't be relocated on the property. So one of the changes to the conditions is that it would be in general conformance, which means currently we're approving 2 structures for 36 units. Let's say they get out there and hit rock and they've got to make the structure smaller. That's okay, they can do 3 structures as long as they don't exceed that 36 units, because that's the intent of the approval on the plan. VDOT has stated that they had no concerns since the increase did not exceed the 600 units that were approved on the previous special use permit. We had conducted a traffic study back in 2006 when we updated the master plan then. Special use permit condition number 2 does require that a second entrance be installed when they get to 505 units. They are currently at 461, so with the addition of the 36 units, they'll be at 497, which is still below that 505 threshold. However, I think any future residential development will bring them back in here for an amendment to the special use permit so they can show us where that second entrance will be located. The site will be served by Montgomery County PSA. It does not lie within a flood zone. It is subject to all stormwater management and erosion and sediment control, and they will have to address water quantity and quality for the entire site. That will all be done during site plan review process. It is an area of urban expansion on our comprehensive plan, and our urban expansion area does support residential and non-residential development, so this special use permit is in conformance with that plan. The use is consistent with the existing development. It's got very minimal impacts. It does not exceed the 600 residential units nor the 505, which would require the second entrance to be identified. So with that, staff has recommended to the Planning Commission approval of the special use permit amendment with the 2 conditions you see there. Condition number 1 carries over, limiting the development to 600 units. And condition number 2 defines the new master plan that they have submitted, but it also restricts it to the 505 before the second entrance to be installed. Joining owners were notified. Staff did receive 1 inquiry. There were no concerns. We did have 1 person speak during the public hearing, citing concerns of emergency access and the proposed number of units. However, this does not exceed the overall units that was approved in the previous plan. So the Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval. And with that, I will take any questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions for staff? Yes, Supervisor Bone.
Will this be independent living or assisted living, or do you know what the...
I do not know. I know they will be apartment units. I know the applicant and owner are both here, so I'm sure that they can answer that question for you.
And do they have elevators? Is it multi-story?
I would assume that all of their units are ADA accessible, but I'm not positive.
Any further questions of staff? And I did not read.
One thing,
Yes.
on the, having fire hydrants and stuff like that? I didn't see none in the plan.
So our ordinance requires that you have to have a fire hydrant, I believe, within 500 feet of the dwellings. So they should have fire safety up there and hydrants. This being central to the current development, I don't know that it would require any more fire hydrants. Neil Turner was sent a copy of the request, and he did not send us any emergency concerns.
Okay.
And I know the applicant's here, but I forgot to read what the public hearing was about, if I recall correctly. And so specifically, the public hearing that we're getting ready to have is a request by Warm Hearth, Inc., specifically Fern Michella, President and CEO, for the amendment of an existing special use permit on the 219.4 acres, updating the Warm Hearth Village Master Plan to reflect the current and anticipated development for the senior living community based on the current development requirements. And that being said, I didn't know if the applicant wanted to address the board at this point in time. They don't have to, but Hi.
Good evening, I'm Fern Michella, the President and CEO of Warm Hearth Village. Do you need my address?
You don't have to state your address.
Thank you. Just to answer your question, this will be an independent living project and there will be elevators.
Thank you.
Any other? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you very much. There is no citizens who are signed up, but that doesn't mean that you can't come forward and speak. Please state your name and your address, and you will have 5 minutes. Seeing no one coming forward, I'll go ahead and close this public hearing. And with that being said, I think we'll take, how about a 10-minute break? Hour? No, let's go with 10 minutes. Let's get started back. Let's start back at 10 till 10. The next item on our agenda is regarding public address, and this is the citizens' opportunity to address the board on any issue. They can state their name and address, and you will have 5 minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board? Seeing no one come forward, I'll go ahead and close out public address. We do have an addendum.
Yes, sir, we do. We have a resolution supporting the town of Christiansburg's smart-scale project for the extension of Parkway Drive. This was something that was brought to our attention by the town of Christiansburg last week, that they needed the county to provide a resolution as well. We got this after the agenda was prepared, so it was not added. We have a number of resolutions under consent agenda this evening related to smart scale projects, but we can either add this to consent agenda. I'm looking at Marty, but
yes, please.
yeah, we can add this to consent agenda if that would be the board's desire.
I'd like to make a motion to add it to the consent agenda.
Supervisor Biggs has made a motion, and Supervisor Shepherd made a second. Madam Clerk, when you get the opportunity, please call the roll.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMott?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
And Chair Tuck?
Aye.
I have 7 ayes.
So that item is now added to the consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion in regards to consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there?
Second.
And that was a motion by Supervisor Biggs and a second by...
I have a comment.
Oh,
Whenever I can do that.
and then we'll need to pull the issue off of consent agenda. Which issue would you like to comment on?
The Smart Road. F, I believe. Extension of the Smart Road.
Okay.
I just want to have a discussion about it.
All right. Now, Marty, I want to make sure I follow the rules. If there's a discussion about it, does it need to come off the...
No.
Okay.
You can have a discussion about it before you vote on consent, and if anyone on the board wants to vote on that particular item separately, then it would be
Okay.
after discussion.
Okay.
So you had a
So
motion and a
Supervisor,
second.
there's a motion, and a second, and discussion. So Supervisor Bone, what would you like to address?
I'd like to understand it better. I did ask Craig to tell me a little bit about it, but I do know, I guess the state owns all the Smart Road property all the way down to the highway, or someone does. And we're just, what are we doing? We're not, I guess it's already been approved that it was going to happen.
I'm actually going to ask Supervisor Biggs because she was an integral part. She was an integral part of that project.
Okay, one of the main reasons that I voted, when I voted on this project, and it was to take the land out of the AFD, was because it was stated that eventually it would be connected to I-81, which I thought was a good idea to have a direct way off of the highway to Virginia Tech. Now, we are, how many years later now? We are, that was in 1996, and it still hasn't happened. So I'm like really wanting to see it happen, but I think that in reality, it probably won't happen anytime soon. But I'm very supportive of pushing it forward.
And that's been the board's, as I mentioned to Supervisor Bone, that's been the board's position under its transportation priorities, is to see the Smart Road completed and then open to public vehicular traffic. It's my understanding VDOT has the right-of-way and actually owns the right-of-way, but through an agreement with Virginia Tech, they're allowing Virginia Tech to use it for research and development, with the understanding that if it ever, if VDOT ever decides to move forward with opening it as a road again, or opening it as a road, they have the prerogative to do that.
And we can't do anything about that.
That's between, well, it's
We can say we like it.
we could say we like it or don't
We
like
could
it.
say we don't like it, but it's still going to happen.
Well, it's a VDOT project, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. I couldn't understand that. Thank you, that's all I've got, and I don't need to take it off the consent agenda.
Okay. Any other discussion on any other item on consent agenda? There is a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepard?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor Demots?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item on our agenda is new business, and the first item under new business is a special use permit, specifically a commercial stable. And is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. I'm always second.
There was a motion and a second. The motion was made by Vice Chair Demots and a second by Supervisor Fidzikowski. Is there any discussion? Being no discussion, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Shepard?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Demots?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
There is another special use
Go
permit
Steve.
and bed and breakfast in. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So there's a motion by Supervisor Fidzikowski and a second by Supervisor Biggs. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Demots?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepard?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item is item C, an amendment to the Warm Hearth special use permit. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion by Supervisor Shepard. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor King. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Demots?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
And Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item is item D, New River Regional Water Authority bond issue. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is motion by Supervisor Biggs. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor King. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Bone?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor... Nope, sorry, Chair Tuck.
That's fine. I'm a supervisor too. That's fine. Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item is reports, and the first report is the county attorney report.
Slide presentation.
Aw.
So
That's about to get excited.
I was all ready for something exciting. And next is the county administrator's report, and I assume he's just going to tell us about his vacation and what it's like to cruise.
Well,
Yeah.
I highly recommend a cruise, especially if you want to eat a lot and be around a lot of people most of the day. But it was very nice. It was wonderful. Glad to be back. Thank you for that. Enjoyed vacation last week. A couple of quick things. This is the 4th week of the month, so it's a busy week for authority and liaison meetings. We have 911 authority tomorrow, Greater Montgomery liaison meeting Wednesday, NRV Water Authority meeting Wednesday, New River MPO meeting on Thursday. But one meeting I wanted to mention that I'll be attending tomorrow is in Salem at 1:30. And that is a discussion of safety improvements for the I-81 corridor. The representatives from Montgomery, Pulaski, and I'm not sure who all else are going to be there. They want to talk about detour setups and some of those things. And I just wanted to mention, we drove to Florida and drove back. Coming back yesterday, Florida, Interstate 95, no real issues. Georgia, Interstate 95, no real issues until you got to where you get off on 26 to come through Columbia. South Carolina, quite a few issues. North of Columbia, not that bad. North Carolina, not that bad. Virginia, not a problem until you got to 81. The issue that I see when I travel is capacity, and it's, Florida and Georgia have invested, I'm sure it's many millions of dollars, but they have multiple lanes and cars move. Even when there's cars broke down or cars that are having issues, the traffic moves. It's when you go to 2 lanes it becomes an issue, and particularly my wife and I both observed there's a lot of trucks on the road, there's no question about that, but when you compare the number of trucks to the total vehicular traffic, you don't see anything like you see on Interstate 81. I mean, it's just amazing. But so anyway, there's a VDOT meeting tomorrow, so we'll be headed to that. I want to mention some good news. I always like sharing good news, and Jennifer shared this with me today. The National Association of Government Communicators recently awarded our Public Information Office with 4 Blue Pencil and Gold Screen Awards. We received 3 awards of excellence, which were in the branding, rebranding campaign category for the Animal Care and Adoption Center branding program. Award of Excellence for promotional campaigns for less than $100,000, which was awarded to us for the Adopt a Shark Week, which coincidentally is also going on again this week. So take a look at some of those fun videos. Also, we received an award of excellence for the public service announcement category for our Crazy for Cats video. And the big one is we won 2nd place nationally in the social media category for our social media efforts for the Montgomery County Animal Care and Adoption Center. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Jen and Durley and Josh for all that. Last but not least, Amy's been sitting down there trooping through tonight, doing a great job. Talk about, vacations and whatnot. Vicky's out this week, but Amy, we're glad to have you with us, and you've done a great job tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Supervisor Biggs.
Okay, Craig, you'll give us a report back about the 81 thing.
Yes,
'cause,
ma'am. Absolutely.
I've got to attend the Region 10 VACO meeting, so and it's in Chatham, so I won't be able to do the 81. I just thought it was really interesting tonight that so much revolved around Virginia Tech, and I think that goes back to our recognition that we all recognize this economic engine, but it was really good to, hear all the different things that were going on there. And I don't think I have anything else except a warning to all women, and men too. Please be careful where you put your pocketbook when you're out in public. It's so easy for somebody that is well adapted at taking things out of purses to do it even in the presence of two former police officers. So just make sure you watch your purse and watch your wallet. And that's all.
I want to clarify things. That was why you were on vacation, and because we do have 2 retired police officers on our board, and they were not present when your purse was
Take offense.
Supervisor Shepherd.
I came from Stewart on Sunday afternoon by way of Sparta, North Carolina. I'll explain that if I need to.
Okay, yeah.
But I didn't come up 77 because I've gone down 77 so many times, and the traffic is backed up like almost to Hillsville.
Yeah.
And that's where I guess it merges onto 81.
It is.
I hit 100, and when I got to 81, it was just like it was 5 o'clock traffic on a Sunday afternoon. It's unbelievable. So I think multiple lanes is about the only answer to that issue from end to end. But anyway,
Yes, sir.
that's all I have.
Supervisor King.
I have no report.
Supervisor Bone.
I want to thank my fellow supervisors for being so supportive of all the activity around the MVP pipeline and how much destruction is actually happening, and the limited ability that we have to support our citizens and the environmental impact that it's having on our county. We'll still stay vigilant, and I appreciate your support moving forward. Thank you.
Supervisor Fidzikowski.
I'd like to piggyback on Craig's comments, and this is coming from somebody who is familiar with all the detour routes from Pulaski all the way up to Botetourt. And your comment about the interstate being overloaded, that's why the detour routes are almost insane when you get on them, because you're taking traffic that normally is flowing at 65, 70 miles an hour, or should I say 75, 85 miles an hour, and you're putting it on, streets with signals and stop signs and what have you. So that is a huge challenge, and I really don't know what way there is out of it, but I agree with Supervisor Shepherd that it just, and I've told everybody, let's just add another lane. We could talk about it all day long and have as many meetings as we want, but we all know it all needs another lane, which I think that's what Delegate Hurst was talking about, the $2 billion. So if we could find the person that stole Supervisor Biggs' wallet and get that money back, we'd have it. I want to thank Amy tonight. She did a good job for her solo flight. So, and of course, Jennifer, congratulations on all your accomplishments. Team effort. Very good. That's it for me.
Vice Chair DeMoss.
2 things very quickly. One, we had a Parks and Rec meeting last week. All the days blend together during the summer for me because of work. So we had a Parks and Rec meeting. You guys probably remember when we received a letter from Parks and Rec asking for guidance on the Shawsville Park and the Auburn Park. And they were extremely appreciative of us immediately saying, let's go out into design phases on this. So I wanted to communicate to all of you their appreciation for that, and their appreciation for how quickly we responded and took action. That really made them feel listened to. And the Parks and Rec Commission has fantastic people on it, so it's very important to me that they know how valued they are. And then the other thing is just a encouragement for everybody to attend Steppin' Out in Blacksburg. That is next weekend, August the 3rd and the 4th. So it's Friday and Saturday. Generally, I think it's 11 to 11 both days. Music, various performances, of course, craft vendors, food vendors, a lot of fun for the family, and so I encourage everybody to go out. That's it.
A couple of things in regards to the Fire and Rescue Commission. The radios are on schedule. They're moving forward with the new radios that we voted for. Talked with Neil, and there's been a couple of glitches that slowed things up as far as ordering some of the parts that they weren't in. But I believe it was $135,000 that's been allocated at this point in time, the money that we have approved, so they are moving forward with it and making the ordering and getting the equipment. And moving forward with upgrading some of the poles that need to be upgraded. In regards to the Planning Commission, my years of being on the Planning Commission, there was a few things that have been, and I guess I'm going on 6.5 years. We've had the abattoir that was controversial out in Reiner, and then the latest is the development in near the orchards. That is going to be coming up on our meeting in August, the first meeting in August. As part of a homework assignment, I hope that all of you will take a few minutes and take a drive out there. Drive out, take a look at the neighborhoods. You can take a look at the orchards. There's some existing townhouses. Drive through those things. There were 124 people at the Planning Commission. Previously, at the first meeting, I want to say there were 38 speakers. I will probably be doing my best to keep that agenda very, very light, and we went on for hours at that Planning Commission. Now, the last time the citizens, they picked about 4 or 5 speakers and elected them basically, or excuse me, there were 4 that kind of spoke for the group. There were some others that went ahead and spoke. I'm not sure how they're going to make their presentations, but then you've got to figure you've got the applicant who's going to present. They're going to make public comments. They're going to be able to respond to those public comments. So I expect that meeting to go very, very late. And so I'm going to, with the help of Vice Chair DeMotts, we'll try to keep that as light as possible.
Maybe a mid-meeting like hot cocoa or something.
Not maybe, it's
Coffee.
summertime.
We'll bring you a banana in case you have
Yeah,
cravings.
well, I tell you what, I've been trying to do a little bit better, and now, man, I was hurting there for a little while. Does that spark any questions or any comments? Being nothing else before this board, this meeting's adjourned.